This camera right here was without a doubt the best purchase I've ever made as a filmmaker and content creator in the sports space. Since its release in 2020, I really don't know where I would be if I didn't invest in this camera as soon as it came out. I pretty much bought it very soon after its release, and I have not looked back, and this camera has been my right-hand man, my daily driver for all of my video work in the last 5 years. This camera has been with me through 3 Stanley Cup Finals, 2 NHL All-Star games, a Stadium Series game, a Winter Classic, the Four Nations tournament that just happened in the winter, and it has helped me create some of my favorite short form and documentary works over the last year specifically, and I truly think that this is the best bang for your buck camera alongside with the FX3 for anybody who really wants to take their filmmaking, whether it's in sports or outside of the sports world, to the next level. Probably about time that I make a video about this camera because I've mentioned the A7S III so many times on this channel, and I wanted to take the opportunity now, after really field testing it for almost 5 years, to give my pure and honest thoughts on this camera. And spoiler alert, I love this thing, as if you couldn't tell already, because it has allowed me to do so many incredible things. There are so many things I love about this camera. There are very few things I don't like about this camera, and I genuinely don't think I'm going to be switching from it in the foreseeable future. But if you guys are new here or not familiar with me, what's going on? My name is Juan. I'm a 27-year-old creative director and filmmaker working full-time in the sports industry. I've been doing this now for almost 8 years, and this YouTube channel is kind of my space to help you guys figure out how to also work in the space. Just kind of trying to give you guys the advice and the tips I wish I had when I first started. Now, this camera represents a huge shift in my creative career because before this, I was using a Sony A7SIII, and that was my first camera ever. And while it was probably the best beginner camera I could have ever asked for, after 3 years of using it, I felt like I was outgrowing what it offered me very, very quickly. And because I kind of hit a limit of the growth I was able to get with the A7SIII, this, when it came out, was the natural progression point, but I was not anticipating that I would grow so much with a camera compared to what I had with the A7SIII, because this camera quite literally changed my life. And I'm really happy to say that after 5 years, almost 5 years of using this now, I haven't outgrown this camera a bit. Instead, I think I'm actually barely still scratching the limits of what's possible with this camera. Now, before I get started, I know I will get questions asking why I got this and not the FX3, or why I still have this and why I haven't switched over to the FX3. And at the end of the day, this was released before the FX3. Sony kind of pulled a fast one on us, dropping this camera and then the FX3 not long after. And I was one of those people who was just so excited that I got this, and then I did kind of feel a little left out when the FX3 came out. In retrospect, the sensor in these two cameras are the exact same thing. They are just housed in a different body. If you were to compare the images from an FX3 and the A7S III side by side of the same image, it quite literally is the same quality and the same image throughout. So I always could have upgraded. The idea was always there in the back of my mind, but it felt like such a lateral move because at the end of the day, a camera is a tool. And if I'm getting the exact same image out of one camera over another, I didn't really think it would make a difference to change. And I usually go by the old adage of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, this video is strictly going to be about the A7S III and my experience with it, because it's not fair because I don't own the FX3. I have used it, but I don't own it. But I will say, if you're in the camp of people who's not sure whether to get one over the other, just know anything I talk about in this video image quality wise is pretty much going to be the exact identical thing with the FX3. The main difference is that the exterior body of the FX3 is different. It has tally lights, and there's also a few internal things that are different as well, but image quality wise, you're going to have the exact same experience. So just keep that in mind when you're watching this video. Now, when it comes to image quality in this camera, it's quite literally incredible. I think that this camera and the FX6 by comparison are seriously punching above its weight class compared to other cameras in this price point. This and the FX3 can easily be compared to the FX6 in some scenarios, and that is quite literally a full body cinema camera. And I can tell you that you can get very, very similar looking images with both of these cameras, and that's very impressive considering the small body size and also the price point that these come at. On the spec side of things, the 4K quality you get out of this camera is unbelievable. I know we have cameras these days that can shoot up to 6 or even 8K, but honestly, especially if you're just shooting for content on social media and things that you're watching on your phone, you don't really need 6 or 8K. 4K is still way more than enough in most cases, and I love that the image coming out of this looks very filmic. It does share the same sensor, like I said, with the FX3 and very similar sensor to the FX6, so you are getting a very filmic cinema level type quality video in this body, which is ridiculous again considering the price and the size of this camera. Now, in that 4K quality, you can shoot up to 24 and 60 frames per second, but you can also shoot up to 120 frames per second. And back in 2020, that was pretty much unheard of. And as someone who shoots sports for a living, you need that 120 frames a lot of the time to really be able to slow down the action in your footage. And being able to shoot that in 4K at the time was one of the biggest selling points for me for getting this camera. Honestly, it was probably the biggest selling point at the time, because at the A7SIII camera that I had before, I was only able to shoot 120 frames at 1080p, and it was a bit soft. Like I said, when I got this camera, my life changed, and the 4K 120 was a huge reason for that. Now, there's a really unique thing about this camera that has allowed me to stay with it over going to something like the FX6, because like I said, the FX3 is a bit of a lateral move. So if I was to upgrade cameras, it would make more sense for me to go to something like an FX6. The reason I haven't though, like truly the one reason I haven't, is because when you record 120 frames in this camera, you can keep the audio with the clip. Versus the FX6, when you record 120 frames per second, you do not record audio. And for me, even though most of the time I'm slowing my footage down 20% when I do shoot 120 frames per second, there are moments where I probably want to play things in full speed, and if there's sound involved with that, I want to keep the audio with it. So that's a really big reason why I've stuck with this, and or why I would stick with the FX3 in the same scenario instead of going up to an FX6, is the ability to keep audio if needed when shooting at those higher frame rates. Quick pause from today's video, because I just want to take a quick second to say thank you to all of you who are watching and engaged with my content over the last few years. Whether you've been subscribed, dropping comments, liking, or even just watching these videos, you have no idea how much I appreciate that and how much it's helped me progress and grow this channel to where it is today. And I really just want to say thank you for a quick second, because I would not be here where I am today making YouTube videos on the side of what I'm doing if it wasn't for your incredible support over the last little while. You guys know very well that I'm here because I want to help you guys grow and break into this industry in the same way I did. And I know that is a pretty big task and something that can be really intimidating, from figuring out how to shoot sports, nailing the right look, or even breaking into the right rooms and learning how to network with the right people to get opportunities. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but I'm here to try and provide value and help you guys along the way. And there's one other way that you guys can support me and that I can help you guys that I want to talk about really quickly. If you've ever gotten value from the content I'm posting here on YouTube and you want to support me a little bit more directly and also get more bang for your buck on how much you can invest in this industry, I actually have a full digital storefront website with a ton of assets and resources to help people just like you guys who are actively working or trying to break into the sports creative industry. On my digital storefront, there are a ton of products that I've been curating over the last few years in order to help you guys create content better and faster than ever before, like the LUTs I use to color grade my videos, the Lightroom presets I use to edit all of my photos, and even strategy guides and email templates for how to reach out to sports teams and get opportunities faster. No pressure whatsoever, but if that sounds helpful or interesting to any of you, just know the link will be down in the description below for you guys to check out my digital storefront and all those assets I previously mentioned. And even if you don't end up buying anything, your support by just watching today's video means the world to me. Anyways, that's it for me. Let's get back to today's video. The dynamic range on this camera is just simply incredible, probably one of the best in terms of cameras in that prosumer price range, and it has taught me so much about properly exposing my images while using this over the last few years. In most situations, I'm able to properly expose for my highlights and my shadows without an issue. Even when I'm outside and it's a bit of a brighter day, I'm able to even bring back information in the sky and the highlights like I was never able to before with my A7SIII because of the dynamic range that this camera offers. And it really doesn't give you opportunities to mess up unless you are severely overexposing your images. But even if you're overexposing just a little bit, you're able to retain so much information and quality in your highlights when you bring it back in post, which is so impressive and has saved me on so many occasions. Along with the dynamic range, I have to mention the 10-bit color depth of this camera. It has been an absolute godsend and a game changer for me in terms of someone who now loves to color grade and experiment with how much I can push colors on a camera. With this and S-Log3, I feel like I have barely scratched the surface in terms of what I'm able to color grade, but it really has given me so much control over how my images look and what treatment I want to give them every single time I'm editing this footage. And I really felt like this camera has never really limited me in terms of how much I'm able to push the colors. Yeah, obviously every camera has limits, but I've never really seen that. I've done some pretty wild color grades to the footage out of this camera, and I have never had the image break apart like it would on an 8-bit camera otherwise. They perfected S-Log3 in this camera. It is quite literally one of the best color spaces I've ever used as a filmmaker. You can also shoot S-Cinetone on here if you need a quick turnaround in terms of the color grade, but honestly, this 10-bit color depth plus S-Log3 has been an absolute dream to work with, and it gets me so excited every time I throw footage onto my computer to edit, to just get straight away into the color grade and try to give it a very specific look. Let's talk about dual base ISO. It's incredible. If you guys don't know what that is, this camera basically has 2 base ISOs at which you get the cleanest image possible. In this camera, it's 640 and 1280. I know the FX3 is 800 for some reason. I don't know why, but at 640 and 12800 ISO, you are going to get clean images straight out of this camera, which means that you can basically have night vision with this camera. And this is a feature I could talk about forever, and it is one of the biggest selling points whenever I recommend this or the FX3 to anybody. Now, I know I'm fortunate enough to shoot in a lot of really well-lit stadiums and arenas, but I know when you're starting off, you don't really have that opportunity. You may be in a really dimly lit gym or a rink that doesn't have good lighting, or maybe you're shooting on your high school's football field and the floodlights aren't great. All you need to do with this camera, and it is crazy that I get to say this, is crank this up to 12,800 ISO, and you're pretty much good to go. I think that should be a selling point for this camera alone. That should be the one thing I say to anybody to want to buy this camera or the FX3 in general. You can't just expect to crank this to 12,800 and be totally fine. You have to understand how to expose for your image. You have to understand, are you exposing for your subject, your highlights, or your shadows? For me, it depends on the scenario, but a good rule of thumb that I find works for me is exposing this anywhere from plus 0.3 to plus 1 on the high end, depending. Again, every scenario is different, every environment is different, but for me, as long as I'm sticking to my base ISOs and exposing anywhere from plus 0.3 to plus 1, I find that's generally the sweet spot to get the best image possible. Autofocus, it's incredible, 0 notes. Sony absolutely crushed it with the autofocus in this camera, and I trust it to a fault, and I'm not going to apologize for that, because at the end of the day, I do manual focus sometimes. It just depends on the scenario, but a lot of the times in sports, there's very little room for error, and the human error that I could do is probably a lot more likely than the autofocus messing up, because truthfully, in 5 years of having this, the autofocus has never let me down when shooting a sporting event. And if you think I'm crazy for saying that, personally, I can't think of a better test for an autofocus system for a camera like a high action, high octane, fast sporting event like hockey, like basketball. This has it shot so many different sports and has it succeeded with the autofocus every single time. And I would be willing to say it's probably the best autofocus system in the camera world right now. Pretty much on any new Sony body, they are on the next level with what they're doing with their focus. Also, the versatility of this camera, and by extension the FX3, where you can use this bare bones or fully rigged out and get great results either way, is incredible. This is truly the most adaptable camera to any environment or situation you can find yourself in. Whether you're shooting live sports or you're shooting a documentary interview, you can set this up in so many different configurations to really fit your needs. Now, usually I have this pretty rigged out for the most part. If you've seen my content before, I have this in a small rig cage. I have a top handle on it. I have a side handle. I have a monitor. I have a V-mount battery. I have a microphone. Sometimes I'll even have a behind the scenes camera on this. And that is for 2 things. Number 1, to really expand on the strengths of this camera, but also add features that I don't have. But it also adds weight to the camera, which I really like. I love shooting handheld, and having a bit of a heavier setup only benefits the way I want my image to look when I'm out shooting in that style. But I've also used a stripped down version of that rig and had no changes in the way I was shooting or the image that I was getting, and that's because of the versatility this camera offers. Last fall, I was shooting the New York City Marathon, and I was chasing my friend Anthony through the streets of New York, and I realized as I was building my camera the night before that I didn't really need a crazy rig for that. So instead of having my usual setup, I didn't have the V-mount battery, I didn't have the side handle, I didn't have a lot of the things that I normally would use. All I really had was the camera, the monitor, and a microphone, and I was pretty much good to go, and the results were exactly the same. And a lot of the times, even when I'm traveling for fun, I take the camera bare bones as is. Maybe I have a microphone on it and the lens, and I just use the flip out screen, and you're totally fine. The versatility of this camera to be able to adapt and be changed to whatever situation you need it to is one of my favorite parts about it as well. Finally, the biggest reason why I have stuck with this camera for almost 5 years isn't any of the specs I talked about, but it's the fact that every time I pick up the A7S III, I feel inspired and able to create at the highest level possible. And after almost 5 years, I really have not felt that feeling go away. And as long as that feeling is there, I'm gonna stick with it. Whether I'm shooting a live sporting event, or whether I'm shooting a documentary interview, whether I'm shooting a short film, this camera allows me to create what I want without limitations. This camera gets me excited to use it every single time I turn it on. I learn something new every single time I pick up this camera. And that's not something that you're gonna find all the time, and so I really value it. And the fact that I have not hit my limit, I have not outgrown this camera yet, I can still push it and create better and more visually impressive things every single time, is worth its weight in gold to me, and really a big reason why this is going to continue to be my go-to camera for the foreseeable future. Is this camera perfect? Of course not. There are so many things about this camera that could be better, and there are things that, for example, its brother, the FX3, has over it. The FX3 has tally lights, which are super handy. The FX3 has an internal fan. By the way, this has never actually overheated on me. The FX3 has other things that make it, in theory, a better filmmaker camera, but at the end of the day, I have been able to create so many incredible things with this camera without limitations. I haven't outgrown this camera yet, and I never once thought that moving over to the FX3 would make me a better filmmaker. Is this the perfect camera? No. But is there really such thing as a perfect camera? I really don't think so. But for me, the A7S III is as close to perfect as possible because it allows me to capture what happens in front of me effortlessly, beautifully, and at the highest level every single time I pick it up. This is a tool that inspires me to create. This is a tool that allows me to tell stories I want to tell. And this is a tool I continuously learn by using every single day. And truthfully, unless Sony drops an A7S Mark IV or an FX3 Mark II, I really don't see myself moving from this camera for a long time. And that is it for this video. That is my love letter to the Sony A7S III. If you guys have any other questions about this camera or the FX3, please leave them down below and I will get to them as soon as I can. I want to help you guys. If you're stuck on making a decision and you're not really sure whether to upgrade on this camera, leave me any comments with any questions you have down below. If you guys enjoyed today's video, if you learned something new, make sure to give it a like. And if you're new here or haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so, as I would really, really appreciate it. And that is it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.